The Moreno family dinners were never really about dinner. Sure, there was food, always exquisite, always catered, but the main course was bragging rights, real estate portfolios, exotic vacations, stock windfalls. That was the flavor of conversation, and I, Elise Moreno, was always seated near the fireplace, quiet, observant, and apparently the family disappointment. That evening, in the sprawling estate outside Santa Rosa, I knew what was coming. I braced myself as Grant, the oldest cousin and king of smug, swirled his glass of Bordeaux and casually announced, "Just closed on a ranch in Jackson Hole. Neighbors got 3 tech patents and a helipad. Pretty low key." Whitney didn't even flinch. She just opened her jeweled clutch like she was pulling out a weapon. "That's cute," she said, flipping her hair. "We just bought a vineyard in the Tuscan Hills, private road to the Mediterranean. You don't buy that view, you inherit it." I took a sip of iced tea and stayed silent. I always did. But I felt it coming. Aunt Renee cut through the posturing like a knife through butter. "Elise," she said, her voice sharp and saccharine, "you've been quiet. Everything okay in Denver, was it?" Grant leaned in, fake concern plastered across his face. "Yeah, we were just wondering how things are going with your living situation." And there it was. "What about it?" I asked, placing my glass down gently. "Oh," he said, raising an eyebrow, "just wondering how long you'll be in that... What is it? A little duplex on Maple Row?" "Still renting, right?" Whitney chimed in, feigning surprise. "Didn't know people our age still rented." I almost laughed. The Maple Row complex was my company's first acquisition under Redstone Equity, a firm they'd never heard of, let alone imagined was owned by me. They thought I was some broke tenant scraping by. I was actually their landlord. "I like the space," I said, voice even. "You're 35, sweetheart," Aunt Renee chimed in, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "Time to grow up. Buy something real." Real, try a $1.8 billion portfolio that included multifamily properties, commercial towers, and, yes, Willowgate Tower. The very place they'd been hosting these dinners for years, acquired quietly by Redstone 6 months ago. They had no idea. "I've managed just fine," I replied, letting them believe what they wanted, for now. Grant chuckled. "You can't even afford a mortgage." I said nothing, just leaned back and let them talk, because in a few weeks their lease renewals would hit their inboxes, with my name on the letterhead. They thought I was nothing but a glorified leasing agent, probably showing basement studios to broke college grads. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Elise Moreno, the family underachiever, was also Redstone Equity, the silent force buying half of Denver while they were too busy flaunting vacation homes on Instagram. Whitney, still in her performance high, leaned in again. "Speaking of real estate," she said with a glint in her eye, "have you heard about what's happening on Maple Row? Some big firm bought the entire block. Rumor is they're going to demolish it all." She gave me a look of fake pity. "Guess that cute little apartment of yours is getting the boot." I kept my expression neutral. I was the buyer. And no, I had zero intention of tearing it down. Maple Row was a gem, brick facades, preserved detailing, rent control protections. I was halfway through a respectful renovation plan that would modernize without displacing a single resident. "Really?" I said with mild surprise. "Hadn't heard." Grant smirked. "Deals like that are way out of your league." Aunt Renee chimed in again, falsely cheerful. "If you get evicted, sweetie, there's always the guest house. Maybe we can help you find something more respectable, and someone more respectable." "I'm happy," I said, voice flat. "And so is my landlord." Whitney scoffed. "You can't live small forever, Elise. The Moreno name used to mean something in this state." Oh, it still did. Just not the way they thought. In investment circles, Redstone Equity stood for ethical growth and preservation-first development. the opposite of my cousin's bulldoze for profit mentality. Then my father, Victor Moreno, finally spoke. Actually, he said, glancing up from his wine, this dinner has a business angle too. The board's concerned about the new majority owner of Willowgate Tower. I tilted my head. We believe they're a foreign investor, possibly a shell firm, he continued. But they're asking questions. Tough ones. Grant nodded. Yeah, probably some trust fund kid trying to flip legacy properties. I smiled behind my glass. The person they feared? The one shaking up their little world. That was me. The next morning, I didn't wake up in some cramped duplex like they assumed. I stood in my real office, a full penthouse floor in downtown Denver with a panoramic view of the skyline and the foothills beyond. Marble floors, curated artwork, and a wall of windows that let the light pour in. I adjusted the cuff of my navy Altuzarra suit. Clean lines, subtle strength. The kind of outfit Aunt Renee always dreamed I'd wear to impress a rich husband. Today, I'd wear it to dismantle their house of cards. My assistant, Isla, walked in with her usual precision. The Willowgate board is already seated, she said, setting my cappuccino beside my laptop. Your family got there early. They're trying to charm the independent members. I smirked, imagining Grant's oily charisma and Whitney's strategic compliments. Too little, too late. Are the audit packets distributed? Every folder, and the forensic team found more than we expected. She paused. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once they know, there's no going back. I turned to the window, catching my reflection. Gone were the thrifted jeans and cardigan. In their place stood the founder of Redstone Equity, a woman who'd quietly acquired a real estate empire while her family dismissed her. They need to learn, I said softly. Legacy isn't a license to abuse power. Isla nodded. The press release goes live in 20 minutes. Once it hits, I'll be unmasked, I finished. Then, let's begin. The Willowgate boardroom fell silent as I entered. My family was gathered at the far end, visibly rattled. No wine glasses, no smug grins, just a vague dread cloaked in cashmere. Grant stood as I approached. Who are you? This is a private. I'm Elise Moreno, I said, calmly setting my briefcase at the head of the table. Founder and sole owner of Redstone Equity, the company that owns this building, and several others your family has leveraged. Aunt Renee's face drained of color. Whitney blinked like she'd seen a ghost. My father, Victor, clenched his pen but said nothing. I opened the briefcase and began sliding audit reports across the polished table. Shall we review your financials? Grant sputtered. This is insane. You're just... What? I asked. The black sheep? The renter? The woman in consignment clothes? Whitney's voice cracked. You show apartments. I work, I said simply. And I built something real. With integrity, not illusion. The board members flipped through the reports, line after line of bloated invoices, shell contracts, and mysteriously disappearing maintenance funds. The kind of corruption hidden in family-run corners for too long. These folders, I said, contain full documentation of financial irregularities tied to Willowgate Tower. I pointed to one file. Grant, would you care to explain the $2.1 million in roof repairs that somehow funded your Jackson Hole ranch? His face flushed, then turned a dangerous shade of white. Or Whitney, I continued, flipping to the next file. Shall we talk about your husband's firm charging triple market rate for basic plumbing jobs? You'd air out your own family's laundry like this? Aunt Renee gasped. No, I said evenly. You aired it out. I'm just making sure it gets cleaned. My father finally found his voice. Elise, sweetheart, we can explain. Don't, I said, raising a hand. I watched this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a bottomless ATM. While you mocked my quiet life, I was building something lasting, on values, not vanity. Whitney's voice wavered. But why pretend to be... Struggling. I didn't pretend, I replied. I lived modestly. I invested wisely. You assumed wealth had to be loud. Grant looked shell-shocked. The Maple Row building? You really live there? I own it, I corrected. And most of the block. And no, I'm not demolishing it. Because some of us care about people, not just profits. Phones buzzed around the table. A board member's eyes widened as she read aloud. Redstone Equity reveals CEO identity. Elise Moreno confirmed as owner of $2 billion. Real estate portfolio. Ranked among top ethical developers nationwide. Whitney fumbled her phone. Aunt Renee swayed slightly. This will ruin us, she whispered. No, I said calmly. This will save you from yourselves. I let the moment breathe. Effective immediately, Willowgate Tower will operate with full transparency. No more shadow budgets, no more sweetheart contracts, no more treating this place like a personal charge account. Grant tried to sound defiant. And if we don't comply? I smiled, unbothered. Then I'll pass these reports to the authorities, the IRS, the Attorney General. I'm sure they'll find it enlightening. Silence. Finally, my father looked at me, not with fury, but with something quieter, sadder. What do you want? I want you to remember what the Moreno name used to mean, I said. Our great-grandfather built communities. He didn't just buy buildings, he gave people homes. He built neighborhoods with dignity. I gathered my files and stood. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy, or find somewhere else to live. I paused. I hear there are some lovely rentals in Lake Otsego. As I turned to leave, Dad's voice followed softly. Elise, wait. I stopped but didn't turn. I was wrong about you. I nodded once. Yes, I said quietly. You were. The days that followed felt surreal. The media couldn't get enough of the quiet heiress of Denver who built a real estate empire in silence and unseated her own family's dynasty in a single board meeting. Headlines called me everything from the tenant queen to Denver's ethical mogul. But behind the noise, I kept doing what I'd always done. Working, leading, building. Aunt Renee resigned from 3 charity boards within a week, too ashamed to keep up appearances. Whitney's husband's contracting firm folded under public scrutiny after the audit reports were made public. And Grant? Grant was actually arrested. Fraud, embezzlement, misuse of funds. All the things he'd once laughed off over wine now stared back at him in a courtroom. But not all of it was bitter. Whitney, surprisingly, started volunteering at a transitional housing shelter. She even enrolled in night classes at a public university's real estate program. Months later, she told me that helping people find homes gave her more purpose than every gallery opening she'd ever attended. And Dad? He asked to learn the business, not as a father asserting control, but as a student. Quiet, curious, humbled. He sat in on team meetings at Redstone, took notes, asked real questions. I think for the first time in his life, he saw me, not the daughter he thought had disappointed him, but the woman who'd picked up the legacy he let slip through his hands. 6 months after that infamous dinner, I was sitting in my office. Well, not the penthouse one, my real favorite. The sunlit study in the Maple Row complex, the place they once mocked. Yes, I kept the apartment, because I loved it. Because some things don't need to be upgraded, just cared for. Tenant satisfaction was up, leases were stable, and the small retailers on Willowgate's ground floor? Thriving. Then came a knock. I opened the door and saw my mother, not dolled up. No pearls. Just jeans and a sweater. Minimal makeup. For a moment, I didn't even recognize her. I think that was the point. She held up a small envelope. Got your invitation? I nodded. Courtyard holiday party. It's not really your scene. She looked around the space, small but warm, filled with history. Maybe, she said, but I'm starting to think. Maybe scene isn't everything. Her gaze settled on a framed photo, me at 23, holding up my real estate license, beaming with pride. "I never asked," she said softly. "Why this path?" I thought for a second. "Because I wanted to build something real," I said, "not just buy it and flaunt it." She looked at me, truly looked. "And now, you control more than any of us ever did." "I do," I said, "but control isn't the goal." She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years: respect, curiosity, maybe even admiration. "Will you teach me?" I smiled. "Come tonight," I said. "Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins." That evening, lights twinkled across the Maple Row courtyard. Snow dusted the brick pathways. Kids chased each other with sugar cookies in hand. Music played softly through vintage speakers. It felt right. I stood by the garden fountain, watching my family acclimate to a world they once dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Lopez, who'd lived in Maple Row for 38 years, nodding attentively as she spoke about neighborhood history. Grant, yes, that Grant, helped string lights alongside Mr. Keller, a World War II vet and the longest-term tenant in the building. Whitney was icing cookies with a group of kids and laughing, actually laughing. They were learning, slowly, awkwardly, but they were trying. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. He held his cup like he didn't know what to say. "You know," he said, "your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets." "I know," I said. I found his old ledgers, handwritten notes, ideas about protecting tenants, keeping rent stable, offering dignity. He looked at me, not like a disappointment, but like a torchbearer. "You could have ruined us," he said quietly. That was never the point. I looked across the courtyard at families sharing tamales, decorating trees, telling stories in both English and Spanish. I didn't want revenge, I said. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. If you've ever been underestimated, if people saw your silence and called it weakness, maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something right, something rooted in values, something that couldn't be taken away because it was made with care, not ego. So if you're in that place, quietly grinding while others dismiss you, don't shout louder. Just build stronger. You don't need permission to begin. You need purpose. You need consistency. The rest will come. And if this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me what you're building, even if no one sees it yet. Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the deep breath before the leap. Because legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be.